Barangaroo Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hello there, welcome to the COB. I'm Nadine Blaney. It is the 24th of August. Nice to be here with you and nice to see some green on the screen to start this new trading week. Like, it's been a bumpy old ride lately, and we've got bonds, to really worry about, those rising yields. I'll be chatting with my special guest about that in just a moment. But yeah, some pretty decent gains for the local market, up by 0.4%. We did see some calm returning to Wall Street on Friday. And then, of course, we've got the absolute deluge of earnings reports. Here locally, we have some big data coming this week. We've got NVIDIA coming this week overseas. As I said earlier today, never a dull moment. So yeah, we're digging these gains. And in fact, I think that also might be a reference to some of the outperformance by the resources names in this reporting season thus far. That include PLS. Lithium prices proving to be a very big tailwind for the company, and that means that shareholders are being rewarded. So striking pay dirt there. And whoosh of words. So we do have Jackson Hole looming. We have a U.S. Fed chair that does not want to give forward guidance, but look, the market might be pushing him more in that direction. We will see. And then you've got Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, going in and buying bonds in the U.S., inflating their way out of this mess when it comes to the debt and the deficit. We'll see. I'll talk to Scotty from StoneX about that in just a moment. Let's just take a look around some of these sectors today and look at these miners. Doing really well. BHP up by 3%. Materials overall up by 2.3%. You can see it extends through to Fortescue, South32, MinRes as well. Uranium, so deep yellow, having a cracker of a session, up by 10%, as is Paladin and Boss. Really couldn't go wrong with these uranium names today. And if we take a look at the flip side, look no further than utilities. We did speak with Chorus across the ditch today. Look, AGL off by 1.3%. Let me run you through some of the big company reports. So Ansell, probably the biggest company there by market cap. At one point, it was up by about 16, even 18%. So looking to lift prices to offset some of the costs that are coming through in terms of inflationary pressures and also the war in the Middle East and tariffs. PLS reinstating its dividend after a 3-year hiatus following a record year driven by the recovery in lithium prices, production, and earnings. Reese, despite reporting a softer profit on weaker U.S. residential construction, ticking higher today. Australasian operations showing improved momentum. I actually had that on the call today with my guests Mark Gardner and David Novak. It was a bit of a fundamental and technical program. It was really good, actually. We talked about Reese if you want to have a listen. Ampol up by 4.6%, first half profits surging. We've got refining and trading benefiting from the Strait of Hormuz remaining closed. The company lifted its dividend, said July trading had also started strongly. And the exception to the rule on that page, as you can see, is Bendigo and Adelaide Bank lifting its full year cash earnings. Strong business and agribusiness lending and rapid growth at Digital Bank up. Doing good things for it, although its home loan book did soften. Now, take a look at Virgin Australia. Bain Capital confirmed it can sell more than $800 million worth of Virgin shares from next week, potentially adding supply pressure to the stock. NIB, its profit fell despite stronger revenue and membership growth, and EVT is exploring the sale of up to $800 million in non-core assets as it sharpens its focus on the hotels business, declared a dividend. And I spoke with Regal Partners CEO on the day that we got its results, and also learned that Regal Partners co-founder Phil King is retiring, so long-serving hedge fund manager there. He's staying through to June of next year, and then there's sort of a different structure. I did ask the CEO about that, and you can take a listen to that interview. It's up online if you so desire. Also, Navigator Global reported today. Assets under management grew strongly, though earnings did ease, but cycling some pretty strong comps. Shares down by 7%. And Chorus, as I mentioned, its profit jumped as fiber uptake continued and the business was simplified, lifting its dividend, forecasting further earnings growth in FY27, but shares down by 5.5%. We caught up with its CEO, Mark Ayo.
We've stepped into our Horizon 2 of our strategy. We're delivering on ongoing fibre connection growth. We're taking cost out of the business. We'll retire copper by 2028 in our outlook. And then that flows on to other opportunities.
So you can listen to that package in its entirety, that interview. It's up online. We've got a whole heap of CEO interviews. If you go to the top of the page and look up CEO Insights, it's a drop-down menu and you can find many of the CEO interviews. We just spoke with Cyclopharm, Regal today, Chorus. Gosh, I'm going to leave people out if I start trying to name them all. All right, let's get to my guest host, COB, David Scott from StoneX. Scotty, welcome. So, what is the bond market telling us?
G'day, mate. Great to be back. And the bond market is telling us a lot of different things at this point in time, but probably the most important thing for broader markets, and I think it's been most influential right now, is what exactly is going on in the back end of the US Treasury curve, because you've got an increasingly interventionist leader of the US Treasury in Scott Bessent. And the fact that they've announced greater buybacks in scale, albeit temporarily, had a big impact midway through last week, but that's been completely unwound now. But the dollar unwind that accompanied it has not. So there's clearly a bit of unease out there about what exactly is going on with the US Treasury, and probably more importantly, the fiscal trajectory for the US more broadly.
Yeah, and so, how do you see this sort of fiscal situation panning out? Like, will Bessent, it's called the Bessent put now, will it be successful ultimately?
Look, Scott Bessent has some pretty big checks on himself, I've got to say, basically telling the market that they were wrong, and that he had asymmetric information that the market did not have, and that potentially we're going to see a big unwind in yields. Look, he could be right, because at a historical perspective, at least in modern times, yields have rarely been this high in the past. But this chart on your screen just gives you a sense as to what's going on. So we had this increased doubling of buyback size for maturities of 10 to 30 years that he announced on Wednesday last week. Just happened to be on the same day that we also saw that US Treasury announced that US debt went and topped $40 trillion for the first time. So clearly it's an arbitrary figure, but it's more so the concern is what's going on with the US deficit at this point in time. You have really strong growth, and at the same time, the US is running a budget deficit of 5.8% of GDP. So what happens when you have the next crisis that's come through? It means that there's going to be probably some question marks raised whether the long end of the US Treasury curve has been that safe haven as we've seen in the past. This just gives you an example here. How debt level as a percentage of GDP has incrementally increased in the United States going back several decades. So right now, 100% of GDP, it's not the largest out there, but you can see why people are starting to go and question the whole safe haven narrative behind the US Treasury market. And that explains quite a few of the moves that you were talking about in the commodity space and other parts of the market over the course of the past week.
Yeah, so you reckon we'll still continue to see gold, silver strengthening, Bitcoin, as well?
Potentially, yes, because there is really some concern about the US dollar. Now, of course, he can come up with a credible plan. Bessent announced when he was talking in a media interview late last week that he was going to release some kind of fiscal consolidation plan that would basically help appease markets and maybe some of that asymmetric information that he has to try and quash that revolt at the back end of the curve. But I'm not sure what he's going to be able to go and drum together in the space of 4 days, because he's supposed to go and say something of the course today, and we haven't really got any inkling as to what it might go and be. But at this point in time, he needs to come up with something pretty credible at this point, because while he thinks the markets are wrong, having dealt in this market for a long period of time now, if the bond market's been saying a really strong message and being ignored, it will make the message even louder.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's one thing to say that you're right. I mean, very different than making a market behave in line with your expectations. So what happens? Is Bessent taking Warsh into a back room? Are they having a little chat? Like, are they getting their notes together or what?
Well, that is going to be the really important message this week. And will we see a complementary signal coming through from the Fed chair, or will he go and contradict what's going on with Treasury? Because thinking back, Walsh's these public appearances that have been limited today, he's made it really clear that he wants the markets to go and take incoming information, then adjust the broader financial conditions to go and assess where policy should be set. He wants the market to go and do more of the work for the Fed. At the same time, you've got an activist Treasury Secretary who's trying to actively go and quash market forces. So how he goes and navigates that at Jackson Hole on Friday is going to be very interesting. I have this really bad inkling that he's probably going to try and sidestep the whole thing altogether and maybe go and give us an update on the task forces that are out there at the moment that he's put in place to go and try and come up with Fed communication and reaction function data and all that. But the market wants answers at this point. So look, when it comes to that speech, we know that in the past it has gone and led to some really big market moves. Will Walsh going to go and do that as well? Look, probably the biggest market move, if he comes across as dovish and the back end of the curve sells off aggressively, then all bets are off. It could be a pretty gnarly opening for us on Monday next week.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Less task force, more just plain talk, one would think is sometimes needed. So what are sort of the Chinese sitting back and thinking when they're looking at what's going on with the yield curve, particularly at the long end?
What are they thinking? I suspect they're thinking that people are starting to go and question the safe haven status of it. And that with that as well, it comes with the US dollar. The US dollar is very, very lucky to go and have that reserve status at the moment. But you take that away, and it would be a very, very tricky situation right now. And you can see what's happening more broadly. There's clearly a shift underway to go into hard assets, that things can go and store value against an inflationary backdrop where there's risk that we might go and see attempts to reflate the debt away one form or another. So really explains what's going on with gold, really explains what's going on with copper, really explains what's going on in crypto, and probably the Aussie dollar as well. It's been the main benefactor of this weakness that's coming through in the US dollar over the past week.
Yeah, okay, so we're keeping an eye on the Aussie, but also because we've got RBA minutes this week, we also have an inflation read that's going to be really important to set expectations when it comes to rates. What are you watching for?
It is going to be a very important week. I noticed last week post the labour force survey for July, we had this scary, an absolutely minuscule increase in the unemployment rate, but it just happened to be enough to go and tick the unemployment rate up to 4.5% rather than 4.4%. The market had a huge reaction, and we've got only a 5% probability price now of a rate hike coming through in September. But this week is going to be arguably much more important because, as you mentioned, we go and see not only the inflation reading coming through for July, first one of the month, of course, of the broader September quarter, but also household spending data. We know the RBA has been explicit in saying that it needs to go and see demand start to go and soften to feel comfortable about the inflation outlook. If you were to get a hot household spending figure, if you were to go and get an upside surprise in the inflation reading, there is every chance that you could go and see market pricing swing very, very aggressively towards the potential for a hike coming through in September. Clearly, it's not favored at this point in time, but a lot can change this week. I'm not sure we're going to get too much color coming through from the various minutes that come out tomorrow, but nonetheless, it'd still be pretty important given they came across as being very hawkish in the statement. They came off very hawkish in the press conference with Michelle Bullock.
Okay, we've got NVIDIA earnings. We've got all the earnings here locally. I mean, in this mix, do you anticipate that we'll see really volatile markets? I mean, it would be hard to imagine it any other way, although for Australia, maybe we're positioned quite well when you consider the overwhelming makeup of our market being skewed in large part towards resources.
Look, I wholeheartedly agree about the local market. Very lucky to go and have that really strong weighting to the resources sector. Just with what's going on there, it is very much in demand in this current environment and helping to go and offset what has been acute weakness that's come through in the banking sector over the past couple of weeks. So that's been a very, very big factor more broadly for the index. When it comes to some of those other markets, though, it's at this point, I'm very, very concerned about some of the movements that we're seeing in the US dollar and the like. So, some of those movements we've seen in gold, crypto, and the like, I don't think they've got no, that they've expired yet. I could be wrong this week, of course, but no, they seem very strong, and there seems to be a lot of power behind it as well.
Yeah, well, we've got Bitcoin up on screen. I think it was up by 23% last week. So, look, It's a really live situation. We will maybe even check in with you later in the week if you don't mind, Scotty.
Yeah, absolutely. And just really quickly as well, I know that's how you've got to get going, but no, on the video as well, I suspect that what we're seeing in that space, not just in the video specifically, but what we're seeing also is maybe a bit of rotation out of those AI names, because the really big, strong momentum we saw back over the course of the past few months or so, that's died down. And I think that's also helping the bid that's coming through in gold and crypto. So absolutely, I'll be around for the rest of the week. So if you want to chat, I'll be here.
In front of your screens, no doubt. All right, Scotty, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights as always.
Great to be here. Take care.
Okay. Let's get back to stocks now, just for a moment. Stock of the day was Ansell. It had a real positive start to the session, still up by between 9 and 10%. David Novak from Wealthwise Education and Mark Gardner from MPC Markets.
It was a super clean beat, and I think there was a fair bit of bad news sort of factored in because there are so many tailwinds out of their control, and it's not a huge margin. The margins aren't massive on this business. But look, I mean, up 18 odd %, you're probably not buying there, but see how it goes from here. But they've been a steady performer. I think they're looking at getting some tariff refunds as well.
It's not boring technically.
Okay.
No.
If you look at the charts, the last year and a half, it's tested resistance level at $38. So where it's back to now, so you can see where it was previously, and that was about November, December. 38 fell to $26, and then now look, it's rebounded here to. So from a share, just a charting perspective, it's had a slingshot move here from the lows in May. Gapped up this morning at near $42, so I would have taken profits on that.
Leaders and laggards today. I mean, I think you saw that BHP did hit a record high, but check out Data 3 in the wake of its results, up by 18%. The guys at Team Invest will be happy. They like the stability of this business. Look at some of these uranium plays. Deep Yellow, Paladin, Hyperion X, leveraged to the States, up by 8%, and Ansell there. Okay, so it gave up a bit of its earlier gains, but still a pretty solid performance coming through there. Flip side to that equation, NIB Holdings on its result, Aussie Broadband, Chorus, Megaport. Look, Megaport reported last week. Reliance Worldwide is under takeover offer, also reported last week, so giving up some of those gains. Now, I will say that Rudy Philippek van Dijk in our afternoon newsletter has written a bit about some of these companies. You might want to check that out. If you don't get the COB newsletter, you should sign up for it, ausbiz.co/newsletters. Nuix smashed it today, up by 35%. It did report. Let's flip the page, see what did not perform, and that would be Kogan. Kogan off by 18% in the wake of its result today. So what's happening overnight? Not a whole heap. It does, as we were just discussing, heat up later in the week, but we do get, second quarter GDP coming from Mexico. We don't mention Mexico very often. Tomorrow, we get Woodside, Centre Group, Coles, G8 Education, Viva Energy. Also, the RBA meeting minutes will be released at 11:30, and also some inflation data coming from China. So where did we finish today? Up by 0.4%. Really strong performance coming through from the miners, as we've said already. And then those idiosyncratic moves coming from reporting season. Data 3, we're looking at you. I've called the company many times for an interview. I'll keep trying. All right. Keep an eye on U.S. markets. We'll keep an eye on them for you overnight. We'll bring you all the information you need to know. We're live at 9:45 tomorrow.